I'm Brett Holland. I spent 4 years at Deep Intent. I just moved over to IQM about 2 months ago. Um, Prior to that, I was on the agency side for about 6 years at Publicis. So I've been in the industry for about 15 years. We have a lot in common. Both Philly guys. He went to Villanova. I'm not going to use it against them. I went to Temple. Um, but yeah, we have an important topic to talk about today as far as cultural marketing and the value of cultural marketing. So we have a few questions that we're going to ask Michael. And we'll kick it off after Michael says a few words about himself. I don't want to steal too much of his thunder.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael Reynolds. I'm the head of Omnichannel at AstraZeneca across the U.S. Biopharmaceuticals business unit. So what does head of Omnichannel mean? Within AstraZeneca means I have media strategy, I have Omnichannel strategy, I have customer experience, and then I just got AI as a little side project there. I'm across the U.S. BBU, so all biopharmaceutical products, which is cardiovascular, renal, metabolism drugs, respiratory drugs, vaccines, and immunology. So happy to be here and happy to have this conversation as it's one that's dear to my heart.
Awesome. All right, so let's get started. In a world of automation and scale, how do you ensure activations still deliver authenticity and purpose, especially when engaging multicultural audiences through sports and cultural touchpoints?
That's a good question. I think what we do is we like to start and end with purpose, right? And I think that needs to carry through everything we do. So as we put together the business objectives, is we work with the teams, we work in like a pod structure. So as I mentioned, the three elements of my team, we kind of surround the brand team and then support them in translating their business goals to like either strategic imperatives, omnichannel strategy, and what their media drivers are going to be. But what we like to do is we start with alignment, right? Alignment on what the purpose is and make sure that carries through, whether it's the audience piece to it, whether the content we're going to use, and even the channels that we leverage. Because what you understand is when you get to the cultural aspect of things, things like channel and how your content is received matters depending on the audience you're trying to reach.
This is good. This is a little off the cuff, so I'm gonna ask it to you anyway.
A little off the cuff. I didn't expect anything less.
I didn't want to throw you a curveball, but I'm doing it anyways. So with med legal regulations, right? How does that also present challenges as far as bringing in strategies around, outside of just your standard segments, reaching beyond that from a creative standpoint, so that you're deploying Spanish-speaking assets, for instance.
I don't like to call them challenges, right? I like to call them our agency problems. So our agency has these problems. No, but I think there's a couple of challenges. I think our biggest challenge is misrepresentation or stereotyping, right? And I think as a brand, you get you get so caught up in the brand strategy or what the data says, and then it can lead to some mistakes happening on the executional side. So you can overgeneralize in some capacity. I know drugs like lupus or over-indexes in minorities, you could play too far into that space, right? And that can become a negative. Another issue we have is just keeping up with trends in itself. I'm in pharma, so when I talked about I don't believe in problems, there are agency problems. That's one of the things we leverage our agencies for, is we move pretty slow, right? We have MLR process, all the regulation you think so. So strategic foresight is something we look for in our partnerships and who we work with. And I think the last thing is just, if you think about it, a lot of these demographics actually have different audience expectations. So when you think of Hispanic or African American, et cetera, it could be very different from if you're from a rural place or from an urban place. It can be very different if you are older generation or a younger generation, right? So those are like some of the challenges we walk into. And I think accessibility within itself, so like language accessibility or things like that, is something we have to stay conscious of, because with healthcare, it's not necessarily as easy as you got to serve the majority, right? It's everyone, it's all inclusive, and it has to be. That's how it's regulated, right? So if someone of that does not speak English can access our information. Like we get dinged for that. So things we have to stay on top of.
Great. I knew that one was the layup for you. That's why I asked that. All right. So, what role does culturally relevant data play in building audience segments that go beyond demographics to reflect identity, values, and lived experiences? And how do you measure that impact?
Just saying anything. I don't even know what you just asked. I'll tell you how we measure impact, though. I don't know the first part of that. You just read that pretty fast. Measuring impact for us, I think, goes beyond reach, right? I think a lot of times there's like the baseline metrics, engagement metrics, et cetera, like that. But when you're doing a lot of these cultural S-type activations or even sports activations, that can't be the end-all, be-all. So brand sentiment is one that we depend on a lot, or any of the qualitative data that we can gather, right? So social listening, send out surveys, et cetera. Another one is like, how do we build community, right? So are we building a community? Are we driving any type of trends and things like that within our audience in itself? Leveraging audience growth is a huge one, right? So especially when you're doing a partnership, we partner with MLB, NHL, et cetera. Is that partnership helping us grow our audience as well? And then I think another one of the key metrics that we use is always back in driving to the business, right? You gotta keep it to the dollars, is that partnership ROI. Now, I always say it's never like a hard metric, and it's never we can it's usually like a back of the napkin type of thing if you think about it, but making sure our dollars are adding value back to our consumers. And I think that's most important. It's not necessarily one-to-one as for a script lift, et cetera, but are we serving up a better experience, right? That matters. Or are we building more community? Are we showing up better as an organization? So it's those type of ways we look at that.
Have you noticed over the past couple of years that there's been more of a focus at AstraZeneca on this topic?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that's probably why they hired someone this young. But pharma is a sleepy industry, right? And it's just being transparent. I think finally consumers, right? The patients, the doctors, et cetera, are claiming it's unacceptable for us not to be better stewards to our consumers, right? So we need to be more personalized. We need to be faster. There's gone are the days where you can just make an advert of an old couple walking through a field and a dog run by, and then here's the brand, right? Gone are those days. So I think it's forcing us to think differently because people gain information differently, right? So there's no linear way. TV is not necessarily the end-all, be-all, and then having that seamless interaction or customer engagement throughout the whole journey is extremely important. So there's been a lot of emphasis and why there even is a head of Omnichannel at a place like AstraZeneca is with data-driven customer experience, right? I always say, like, we're here to build relationships, and that's what we're trying to do, so.
Flip the screen time. All right, so when partnering with athletes, leagues, or cultural events, how do you evaluate not just the reach, but the authenticity of the alignment with your brand and mission, particularly in a regulated industry like pharma?
So we kind of just talked about that.
Yeah,
We're not gonna, but I can double down explicitly on like the athlete or the sponsorship piece. I think there's a couple of things. There's like target alignment, like target audience alignment, truly matters. I think sometimes you chase a shiny object, right? Or you chase like the most popular thing, but the reality is we have to benefit on the back end. That's the AZ answer, right? And then there's the patient centricity answer, right? So it's like, all right, does our customers, do they align with this particular sport? Do they align with this particular organization, et cetera? And I think that's a very important thing, especially nowadays, is being like, purpose-driven or mission-driven. Right? So a lot of our sponsorships or partnerships that we do today, and I named a couple real bigger ones, but they're also aligned with some type of cause or some type of something that we can build that true, authentic connection. Otherwise, we just become, and I hate to say this for the F1 folks, just another name on the car, just another name on the shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, there was actually a treatment when I was on the agency side for MS, and the commercial was basically them walking, hiking, doing all these fun activities, right? And there was a lot of backlash with the MS community because of it. So to your point, you have to be very careful from a creative messaging standpoint, specifically to certain audiences. All right, How do you define marketing with purpose? What safeguards do you put in place to avoid superficial representation in your campaigns? For instance, in the context of AstraZeneca, you had mentioned Safnello. Treatment for lupus over-indexes with Hispanic and African American audiences. How are you putting that into context?
First answer, I think marketing with purpose, and for me, it's very simple, is like not focusing on the dollars.
Sure.
Right? So actually having a mission, showing the audience or your customers what you actually care about, and following that throughout the whole campaign. I love that you brought up Safnello, and Safnello, for me personally, being African American, is one of the drugs that I'm very proud of a lot of the work we did. So I can give a good example. So one of our latest campaigns that I actually led for Safnello was based on just how do we like live more with this particular disease, right? So the campaign was called Here for More. Right, and we did thousands of interviews and understanding the patient population and understanding the reality is most people just wanted to feel more than their disease, right, and wanted to live the type of life that is expected from someone without. So what did we do? We did a lot of patient storytelling, right? We did a lot of work within highlighting the inconsistencies or the disrepidity with how the awareness and the care for the disease is and how it over-indexes, like you said, in mostly African-American, Asian, and Hispanic women, right? So that was a big portion of it. Then we did a huge thing on Safnello supports or Access 360 to access to education, access to financial support, et cetera. And then one of the coolest things that we did, it was my little baby, is we did like a AR-enabled digital innovation on social media platforms. So the women could see themselves as we called butterfly warriors. And why it's called butterfly warriors is if you know anything about lupus, you get a rash that's in the shape of kind of like butterfly wings, right? So what we did is we approached it more than just we need to sell this drug. We educated them on what this is, why it's important, and why is it over-indexed in this particular community. We gave them access to different financial support throughout. We empowered them through their stories and made sure they're not alone. And then lastly, we gave them something fun and innovative to hold on to, right? As that butterfly warrior that was beyond just the disease, right? Sometimes I think when we talk about marketing, it's like, are you curing for the symptom or are you curing for the disease? And that's how I like to put it in perspective for myself. It's like a lot of times we just talk about the cures for the symptom. So basically we're to prolong you being in your current situation. But we talk about like, the disease doesn't embody you and you can be who you want to be regardless. I think that's the true unlock. So that's one of the times where I felt like we put it all together and showed up the right way.
Do you think there's a greater sensitivity around frequency to specific treatments like lupus, where there might be a little bit more hypersensitivity, just like HIV, for example? I know for Gilead and for GSK, there's hypersensitivity just around frequency control.
Yeah, I think frequency control, to me, being an omni guy, comes through like actually cross-channel orchestration, right? Understanding all the customer touch points or engagement points that this individual is going to have with you and your business. Because truthfully, AstraZeneca shows up in many ways. AstraZeneca medically led, AstraZeneca commercially brand led, AstraZeneca educational led through some of our partnerships, et cetera. So understanding that piece of it is extremely important and how you orchestrate across all the channels. Secondarily, you gotta realize we're talking about someone's health.
Right.
So I'm sure everyone knows someone with some type of disease or you're dealing with something your own, and that's not something you just broadcast in opening conversations, right? Or it's not something you're just willing to talk about all the time. Or it might be something that brings you pain, right? When you think about it or when it's constantly brought up in your life. So just understanding that aspect of it, the human aspect of it, is extremely important, right? So a lot of say increase frequency, or do this, that, et cetera. Yeah, that's when you're not dealing with something that's so interpersonal, whether it's to that individual or to their family member. So I like to think of it, what Michael can control is how we orchestrate across channels. And I think what we can control as an organization, as marketers, as partners, et cetera, is that compassion element for what we're doing and how we're talking about it, right? Context matters, right? Are we speaking from a negative place, from a positive place, et cetera, right? So I think the frequency play is a unique thing, but it's something that is a problem.
Sure. All right, can you share an example where a culturally anchored, purpose-driven campaign delivered measurable business impact, whether through brand lift, engagement, or other outcomes?
Culture, I mean, the Sapinel example is probably the best example. I won a few awards for that. But I think since we have a diverse audience, I'll share like some other things that we've done even on the sports or partnership side. When I like to look at it, we usually approach our sponsorships or our partnerships in two ways. It's either like cause related, right? Or where we're like actually like aligning on a purpose, a mission together, and we're partnering in spreading that word or educating. Or it could be just simply like awareness and frequency play, where we're partnering the credibility or the ability or the trust of that partnership. So examples of both. I'll do a shout out to my friend Siddharth, who's on the OB or the oncology side. We do Hockey Fights Cancer. Right? I think it's a major partnership we do from the oncology side of AstraZeneca with the NHL. Right? As you can see from the title or the name of the thing, we're not the only ones that play in it, but it's something that matters to us. It's a mission that matters to us, and NHL provides a platform for us to leverage them and show that we care alongside of them, right? So that's one of the bigger partnerships that we have. For our Lokelma drug, we have a strikeout high potassium, Strikeout high potassium is part of what the MLB project. We partner with some of the pitchers and some of the stadiums and be able to donate money depending on how many strikeouts that pitcher shows. Once again, leveraging that credibility and that trust and that brand trust that the MLB has, that star power of the athlete, and then aligning it to something that we care about, and while educating the masses while we're doing that. So that's more on the cause-related side. And then we have just like frequency awareness play. Farxiga, the biggest band that ever went through AstraZeneca, $2 billion revenue-driving business year. We just did, we call it the Echo campaign, right? And we partnered with the MLB. All the stadiums, they'll play this little short, I think it was like 7 seconds, highlighted Farxiga, and then it's like chanting Farxiga, Farxiga, kind of like they would chant at any game, cheering on their favorite player or their favorite team. So two simplistic ways to look at it, a partnership, two very, very profitable and successful campaigns for us.
As you were talking, I was almost thinking about, is there a localized effort involved with what you're doing? Obviously, certain communities over-index certain areas. Is, like for MLB, for example, the pitchers, is that a localized effort to the city? How does that exactly work?
No, that's a great point, and that's exactly how it works. I think there's a healthy tension between being a global company, right, and then supporting the U.S. only. So that's the first barrier of entry, and then, like I mentioned before, and the differences between how location comes into play, ethnicity comes into play, et cetera. So the location. So we like to partner holistically, I guess I'll say, and be very smart that we're leveraging the right athlete in the right market, for example, right? We do a lot through Hispanic Heritage Month in the MLB, especially around our Sapinello portfolio, which is the lupus drug. Or and then in that, obviously, we're going to highlight Hispanic originated athletes, things like that. So it's very top of mind and something we highly focus on.
All right, last question. As technology evolves, how can brands use AI and omnichannel strategies to deepen cultural connection without losing the human touch, especially for communities historically underserved by mainstream marketing?
So I knew we'd get an AI question. I think a couple of things. I think the word underserved in itself should tell you what you should do, right? Overserved, right? I think, right, and I'm a very simple guy. I don't think I'm the smartest guy, but make things happen a little bit at AZ. I think when you think about it is how we leverage AI and et cetera is more personalization, right? More data-driven marketing, right? So you can be able to get content out faster, content that's more aligned to the individual, right? And that's, we can be predictive in that based on a lot of myriad of factors there. So I think that's the first part. I talked a little bit about it, but channel orchestration, we leverage that significantly, right? So affinity data on where this person shows up, right? Or is they more prone to an email versus a programmatic display or a banner, something like that, or even face-to-face, or even leveraging communities, as in like churches. If you think about the underserved community, they trust their pastor more than they trust their doctor, right? So being intelligent enough to where you have to use experiential, shout out to my experiential person in the front row, but when you have to use experiential and things like that, and those type of partnerships with churches and community centers, et cetera, like that. So it's like, it's being hyper-focused on that area and letting AI help us make faster decisions. The last thing is, and you talked about a little bit, is you gotta be smart about it, but increase frequency to these individuals that don't see themselves every day and what's reflected on a global or even national level, right? And that's what happens when you use channel orchestration the correct way, right? Is they could see themselves and have a seamless interaction with us, regardless of where they're interacting with us. And it helps build that confidence within themselves, but also confidence in AstraZeneca that we care about them, we're thinking about them, and they're a priority to us.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank you.